Why did the Bucharest government surrender Bessarabia? Because of a direct ultimatum from Moscow. The loss of one-third of the territory occurred in a single summer. In 1940, politicians redrew state boundaries on paper maps across the halls of Bucharest. The combined area of lost Bessarabia and northern Bukovina alone exceeded 50,000 square kilometers. The Soviet Union took the east. Hungary took northern Transylvania. Romanian troops retreated. This territorial amputation instantly destroyed King Carol II's authority. Riots erupted. Legitimacy vanished. By the end of summer, the country was missing exactly one-third. 48 hours was all the general needed to seize authority. Amidst the chaos on September 4, 1940, Ion Antonescu took full control of the government. The capital population watched civilian power transition to military forces in just 2 days without a single shot fired. The transfer followed a strict administrative schedule rather than a violent overthrow. Antonescu forced King Carol II to sign his abdication, clearing the highest office. He elevated King Michael I, turning the young monarch into a compliant figurehead. With the 1938 constitution suspended, all decisions required only the marshal's signature. Facing the threat of Soviet expansion, the regime required a military guarantor. Antonescu calculated that the Third Reich offered the only viable leverage. The government abandoned its traditional treaties with the Western Allies. The marshal dispatched envoys to Adolf Hitler, requesting official protection from Berlin. Where did the general acquire his methods of total suppression? The answer lies 33 years before the dictatorship. He learned this from the cavalry charges of 1907. Born on June 15, 1882 in Pitești, Ion Antonescu absorbed military discipline early. His father forged his character. A massive agrarian revolt became the turning point as the peasant uprising engulfed hundreds of villages. It triggered the largest social explosion in the entire region. King Carol I demanded strict order. In Galați, the young officer demonstrated his geopolitical utility by deploying troops against citizens. Initiating his first experiment in domestic state terror, Antonescu ordered a direct assault. Steel cavalry lances pointed at unarmed peasants while soldiers swept the impoverished crowds away with spears. Such tactics brought immediate royal praise. The rebellion was crushed. The streets fell silent. A military attaché meticulously analyzes defense budgets within the diplomatic offices of Paris and London. This calculating strategist previously directed the defense of Moldova during the First World War in 1916. The recognized commander who once protected his country from advancing German forces eventually became their primary geopolitical ally. Direct access to the actual military spending of the Allied nations exposed a severe systemic vulnerability. These classified ledgers revealed objective political realities. By evaluating these concrete defense expenditures, the officer concluded that Western democracies structurally lacked the necessary strength for long-term survival. Armed with this pragmatic calculation, he claimed the post of Minister of National Defense in 1937. How did Bucharest pay for German armor to crush internal rivals? With the oil of Ploiest. By January 1941, accumulated military experience clashed with armed fanatics of the Iron Guard. A 3-day civil war erupted, the capital burned, streets were barricaded. He requested immediate help. Adolf Hitler agreed. The transaction was direct. The black gold of Ploiest became the currency for political dominance. These fields extracted over 5 million tons annually. Luftwaffe squadrons and Wehrmacht divisions required this fuel to advance. German armor entered the city. Heavy steel tracks clanked against the pavement. Insurgents fell. The uprising collapsed. German machine guns and Romanian tanks on the streets of Bucharest left the general as the sole ruler. Why did Romania join Operation Barbarossa on June 22, 1941? The primary objective was direct control over the strategic port of Odessa. The forced partnership with Berlin quickly evolved into a fanatical Eastern campaign where state ambitions completely overshadowed human lives. Taking the coastal city required a grueling 2-month siege that steadily ground down the attacking forces. 100,000 Romanian soldiers perished in the muddy trenches while trying to capture the objective. These catastrophic military losses ultimately transformed the regular army into a massive punitive instrument of the state. Retaliation for battlefield casualties and headquarters sabotage became the official policy of the occupying military administration. In Odessa, troops actively organized mass executions by driving 25,000 Jews into large ammunition depots. Soldiers barricaded the heavy doors from the outside and deliberately ignited the surrounding structures. The loud cracking of burning wooden beams echoed across the dark port warehouses. The extermination campaign rapidly expanded its geographic reach far beyond the borders of the coastal city. 120,000 people were destroyed in a few months. This specific death toll exceeds the entire modern regular armies of the Czech Republic or Bulgaria. By late 1941, the execution logistics relocated to the freezing grounds of the Bogdanovka camp. The final body count at this specific site reached exactly 48,000. The state never called those 48,000 dead a war crime. Official papers hid the reality. Bureaucrats framed the slaughter as sanitary clearance. The term was disease prevention. Tens of thousands of Jewish and Romani citizens died. Phrasing shielded the executioners. It erased legal guilt. Murder became standard administration. Out of 16 million citizens, minorities vanished. Ledgers replaced lives. Paperwork protected killers. Blood flowed. Nobody asked. It was neat. The government formally cemented Romania as an active perpetrator in the global Holocaust. Where did the most elite divisions of Marshal Antonescu disappear? They remained entombed beneath the snowdrifts near Stalingrad during the bitter winter of 1942. While chancellery clerks calmly drafted sanitary quotas for extermination camps in the rear, an unprecedented military disaster unfolded on the Eastern Front. Romanian infantry units found themselves utterly exposed without heavy artillery support, facing a massive breakthrough of Soviet armored forces. The frozen bodies of ordinary soldiers soon blanketed the vast steppes, slowly vanishing under the falling snow. Strategic miscalculations transformed these frontline troops into a convenient human shield intended to protect retreating German panzer formations. The ensuing slaughter yielded a staggering toll of 150,000 dead and captured Romanian servicemen. This catastrophic figure represented the equivalent of 10 full-blooded infantry divisions, an irreplaceable loss that domestic industry and demographics could no longer replenish. The dictatorial regime sacrificed its core military asset, permanently crippling the combat capacity of the national army. The loss of these veterans marked a definitive point of no return for the entire political administration. By 1944, the geopolitical map shifted dramatically as the Red Army launched a sweeping counteroffensive toward national borders. Despite this undeniable territorial collapse, the Marshal stubbornly maintained his blind loyalty to Adolf Hitler, actively rejecting any diplomatic negotiations. This rigid ideological stance stripped the government of its remaining sovereignty, deliberately pushing the exhausted nation toward total destruction. The king prepared a coup. Palace doors closed behind Antonescu on August 23, 1944. The monarch's personal guard blocks the exits. Brass locks click shut. Blind loyalty to Adolf Hitler left King Michael I with no remaining space for diplomatic maneuvers. Soviet divisions were already crossing into Moldavia. The dictator expected a standard briefing. Instead, the king ordered his arrest. Power evaporated. Generals and ministers froze immediately, leaving the government bureaucracy entirely devoid of leadership within mere hours. Overnight, Bucharest announced a ceasefire with the Soviet Union. The transition moved fast. Royal officials signed the documents declaring war on Nazi Germany. Where did the ousted ruler go after the palace arrest? First into the secret basements of Bucharest, and then on a special flight to Moscow. After the August 23rd operation, the former head of state became a valuable political trophy. Moving the dictator to the Soviet capital demonstrated a new geopolitical balance. The Soviet Union now entirely controlled the fate of Romania. Local guards handed him over to foreign intelligence agents. The long transport initially ended at a luxurious Moscow villa. But this quiet residence was merely a short transit point before the concrete cells of Lubyanka prison. Investigators moved the marshal to the notorious detention facility, beginning long interrogations regarding genocide. The former commander remained in a dark cell awaiting the final judicial sentence. June 1, 1946, Jilava prison courtyard. The former head of state steps to the wall. Gravel crunches under the guard's boots. The prison yard falls silent. Ion Antonescu stops. He wears no military uniform, no gold braiding, no medals. He chose a strict, dark civilian suit instead. He refuses the blindfold. His head remains high. The firing squad raises their rifles. This man once commanded vast armies. Europe knew him as the Red Fox. He directed Adolf Hitler's Eastern Front. Romania deployed over 300,000 soldiers there. It formed Germany's largest allied army. Antonescu wielded supreme authority. He was an outstanding cavalry officer. Veterans adored him after the First World War. He entered the palace as a sole savior. He promised to protect the crumbling borders. Instead, his policies fueled mass murder. He turned the state into a weapon. He tied the nation to the Axis. That strategic gamble collapsed. The borders vanished anyway. Now the alliance lies in ruins. The supreme commander is just a target. Trial is over. The rifles are leveled. The ousted dictator stands motionless, staring directly down the dark steel barrels of the executioner's rifles. Just 2 weeks before the final events at Jilava prison, the legal machinery had already crushed the dictator. On May 17, 1946, the tribunal delivered its final verdict. The sentence was death. The state systematically prepared to eliminate its former supreme leader. Who could cancel the execution? Only King Michael I possessed that constitutional power. Yet the monarch categorically rejected the petition for clemency. It was absolutely final. King Michael I had personally orchestrated the state coup in August 1944. That sudden uprising permanently stripped Antonescu of his executive authority. It abruptly shifted Romania to the anti-Hitler coalition. Now the monarchy completely distanced itself from the disgraced marshal. The Romanian state meticulously finalized the legal annihilation. The government showed zero hesitation, and the refusal of a pardon sealed his fate. He was legally doomed. The authorities scheduled the final procedure with mechanical precision. The executioners received their orders. The firing squad awaited the exact minute of death. The state protocol mandated the execution at exactly 1800. The defendant listened to harrowing testimonies detailing mass executions. Yet he remained exclusively outraged by the absence of special meals. The path to this historic courtroom confrontation had opened shortly after his extradition from Moscow back to the Romanian capital. Prosecutors presented undeniable evidence of tens of thousands burned alive and shot. Meanwhile, Ion Antonescu casually complained that the prison administration failed to provide his vegetarian diet. This stark disconnect defined the proceedings at the People's Tribunal in Bucharest. The dictator obsessed over trivial detention conditions while facing accusations of subverting world peace and commanding genocidal campaigns. In May 1946, Soviet authorities handed the once illustrious marshal over to face his own compatriots in a city seething with anger. The atmosphere inside the overcrowded courtroom was suffocating, heavy with trapped summer heat. Prosecutors systematically read endless lists of victims discovered in mass graves across Odessa and Transnistria. The Transnistria Governorate had been specifically established by the Romanian state in 1941 to deport and isolate the Jewish population. Hundreds of thousands of human remains lay buried beneath the soil of these occupied regions. Despite overwhelming documentation regarding atrocities against Jewish and Romani communities, Antonescu resolutely refused to enter a guilty plea. He maintained an attitude of extraordinary obstinacy, dismissing the immense blood debt presented by the prosecution. The former leader repeatedly justified his wartime actions by claiming he was merely a soldier caught in a desperate historical situation. His statements ignored the meticulously planned nature of the ethnic cleansing operations. The legal defense strategy focused entirely on transferring responsibility for the massacres directly to Berlin. How did national security ideology lead to execution trenches? Through an official order for a bloody purge. Excuses about German pressure shattered against reality. The Marshal issued direct commands to eradicate people within the Romanian zone. His alliance with fascism transformed the nation into a weapon. The target was Odessa. In October 1941, local partisans detonated the Romanian military headquarters. Retaliation struck fast. Between 25 and 34,000 Jewish citizens perished in just a few days. Firing squads operated in shifts. Tens of thousands of victims for the ideology of purification. Extermination became a calculated geopolitical strategy to cleanse captured territories. Soldiers shoveled cold earth over the execution trenches. 400,000 lives. The execution trenches in Odessa were merely a fragment of a broader strategic collapse that ultimately handed Romania over to foreign control. Ion Antonescu wagered the survival of his nation on a military alliance with the Third Reich, hoping to secure borders through aggressive expansion and ethnic cleansing. The dictator justified the extermination of Jewish and Romani populations as a necessary measure for national security, deliberately binding his government to the axis of wartime extremism. When the firing squad raised their rifles in the Jilava Valley, the deposed marshal tipped his hat in a final, calculated gesture of military honor. He attempted to preserve his dignity, standing tall in front of the executioners. Yet the official state documents told a different story. Archival records logged the eradication of innocent civilians, reducing human lives to cold statistics across endless bureaucratic ledgers. This nationalist gamble failed to protect the state, ruining its standing at international negotiation tables. Instead of securing independence, the policies of racial purification paved a direct path to foreign domination. The heavy steel tracks of Soviet tanks crushed the Romanian border crossings, shattering the dictator's promises of territorial defense. Following the war, the 1947 Paris peace treaties formalized this geopolitical failure. The nation lost significant territories, surrendered its political sovereignty, and was forced to pay heavy financial reparations to the Soviet Union. The state paid the final price for this disastrous alliance in blood, freezing the count at 400,000. Did mass graves stop political fanaticism? The answer lies in post-war historical foundations. Countless civilian victims died. Sovereignty vanished. This was the harsh verdict. Extremist ideologies masked their true goals. Dictators claimed to defend the nation. They promised salvation. They delivered ruin. Extremism solves nothing. Violence brings collapse. Blood builds nothing. The military tribunal ordered death. The Jilava prison witnessed the execution. Guards shot Antonescu. Bullets shattered wood. But iron gates never closed. The facility stood ready. The incoming communist regime took power. They claimed the prison. Guards filled the cells. Dissidents suffered inside. Cold stone walls absorbed new screams. The infrastructure facilitated fresh terror. Jilava remains an active state penitentiary today, currently holding hundreds of regular inmates behind high concrete walls.